Okay, so we had a video already on public APIs, and that actually had some popularity. So we're going to do the opposite of that. Still working with the web, we're going to do private APIs. The difference between a public API and a private API is that in a public API, everyone can really access it from the URL or through a JSON object or something, and then they can get data from it. It's just data that's out there. Let's say you have a database like this, a database of users, and you want to let people be able to get access to your database, but you only want them to get access to this database um, privately, as in you can't see this out there. And you also want to track who's using the API and what application they've built to use your API. Okay, so we're gonna do all that. Basically, I'm not gonna explain I'm not gonna program this with you. I'm only gonna explain it because it's way too in depth to actually do in front of you. Basically, there's a table here that I want. The rest of these tables are all for the API development. We've got a log table that basically logs everything that's happening, and I'll get into this in a second. But it's going to log. Let's browse this a couple times. It logs a specific signature, the time the time that a call was given, and it actually lists. If I pull this out, it actually lists all the parameters of the call. So here's the signature of the call. The method was called get user, and I got user 2. So it actually gives me all the details, and it logs it all every call, so I can monitor what's going on. I've got a list of developers here that all have a username and password and a specific secret, and I have all the apps that are listed here that has the developer that has the app, the name of the app, the description of the app, and the app also has a secret. Both the developer and the app have a secret. Okay? And then I've got active, which is basically all of the active signatures. The way this whole process works, let's actually go to the index page. This is the page that that the application is, but I'm just going to explain the flow here. Basically, you're going to send the unique developer identifier and the app unique identifier to the API, actually to an authentication file, which is still part of the API. Then we're going to make sure that developer and that application exists in the database. So before all this, you'll actually need to come up with this. You'll have to come up with a little system where developers can log on and create a developer account, and then create an application. If you develop an application for Facebook or whatever, you have to make your developer account, and they give you a secret key. Okay? Then what you do is you make sure that that developer and that application both exist in the database. Then we can move on. Then we create a signature, and I'll show you that in a minute, a random signature. We store it in the active table, and we pass it back to the developer. And as in every call that's made during that session with this API needs that signature. It will not be valid if that signature isn't in the database. Okay? Then basically we start making calls with that signature. And then every time we make a call, we make sure that signature is valid, and then it belongs to you. So how this process works, we're going to use curl to do our remote our remote setups. So basically we're gonna call, this could be any site. This would be the API site. This is just localhost because I'm doing it that way. So basically we're going to call private API slash auth.php. We're going to send auth our developer secret and our app secret. Again, these were generated beforehand. Okay? Beforehand. So developer secret and app secret. Let's go into auth and see what happens. There's a lot of error checking. A lot. And that's because when you're doing any kind of API, you need to basically give all information back to the user. Any possible error that could happen, give it back to the user. So first we check if the post was sent. Then we check if it's null. Then we check if it's an array. Then we check. Then we real escape it so it's sanitized. Then we check to see that there's a secret, and etc. 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 And then once we have all that, we connect to the database and we select our database. And the last step of this is really the meat of it right here. We try to get the developer, and then we try to get the developer's information, and then we try to get the app, and then we try to get the app information. Once all that is successful, all that error checking is successful, then we create the signature, which is just basically we're MD-fying the app ID and the developer ID and a random number. That's our signature. You can be more secure, but that's our signature. Then we store that signature in the active table, as in this signature right now is active. And then we send that data back with a timestamp to the user. So what we get back is we get our response, and then we say response signature, and we say if we have that signature, now we move on. So now we're going to start making some calls. Okay? So now we're using our API.php. Send your signature, always. This is the signature that we got back. Anything you do will not be valid unless this signature is here. So we're going to send the signature. Then we're going to choose our method that we want. We want to use the getUser method. And of course, there needs to be public documentation or documentation that you give your users of what methods are available and what properties. So I know that in API.php that I have a function, there's a function called getUser. And there could be multiple functions, but right now I only have one function in my API. It's function getUser, right? So over here, I'm going to call getUser, and I'm going to pass it a parameter of 2. Okay? Then we actually send that, and we get some data back. So let's take a look at API.php. Again, lots of error checking. We check if the post is here. We sanitize the data. We check if the API is there. Then we actually check our signature right here. We got to check that our signature is in the database. It's active currently, as in it's not inactive. Okay? Once the signature is valid, we check if the function that I called exists. If the function exists, then we're going to go ahead and call the function, which is right here. Call the function and send it all post. Basically, I've sent it and user, so that's going to do that. Now, this function is expecting user, so that's why that parameter works. So it's expecting user. So this function's been called, user has been passed, and so now we say, some more error checking. But basically, this is just the method. It can be whatever you want, but this is just the method. And then in every method call, I also have this call right here. Insert into signature post signature. So I'm inserting into the log. So I'm logging every function. And you can make this some other thing, like, you can make a function called log, but whatever. This is right here. It logs whatever happened. So if I go back to the web page where this all works, and I refresh this is making an API call. Error is null. Success is true. The data that I get back is 0 ID. I get Bob in Florida. I requested user 2, and here is user 2.